In a sea of fast food competitors, White Castle stands out. Perhaps it's the small size of its iconic sliders, the mystique of its busy late-night hours, or scarcity in certain states. But the company has been successful creating a crave-worthy business. Here's the untold truth of White Castle. Making history. As strange as it sounds, America's entire fast food industry began with White Castle back in 1921. With just $700, Edgar Waldo Ingram and Walter Anderson opened a tiny burger shack in Wichita, Kansas. Yes, it looked like a little White Castle from the beginning, and the rest is history. Legend has it that's where Anderson invented the hamburger bun as well, changing burgers forever.
Why did the slider go to the gym?
I don't know.
To get better buns! Get it? Buns!
Want in on the deal? That's too bad because the company likes to keep its fast food empire within the family and doesn't franchise. Why? It mostly comes down to keeping restaurant locations within close proximity to its supply facilities, and while that means they have far fewer locations than they could, it's all about quality. That refusal to franchise also comes with a weird footnote. Since moving their headquarters to Ohio in 1933 and closing their last Kansas location in 1938, there are no White Castles left in their home state. Health and cleanliness. White Castle was founded at a time the American public was dubious about the cleanliness and safety of many foods, and that's why the founders decided to make their restaurant white. They wanted a look that gave the place a sense of cleanliness, and it worked. Employees working behind the counter were also held to strict standards. Old White Castle employee checklists showed that they were told to be clean-shaven and were warned about bad body odor and bad breath, and needed to have their hair neatly combed and tucked under their hat. This level of cleanliness has continued, and White Castle was one of the first fast food chains to show transparency by displaying restaurant health scores online. Cleanliness and safety go hand in hand, and White Castle also went to extreme lengths to disprove the early 20th century idea that burgers were super dangerous. One University of Minnesota med student risked everything to eat 13 weeks of burgers for a joint study. When he came out the other side, absolutely fine, White Castle used his study to prove burgers weren't deadly after all. Changing for the best. The price isn't the only thing that's changed since 1921, and over the years, the cooking process changed too. While burgers were once cooked by placing small balls of meat on the grill and squishing them, that's not the case today. Now, frozen beef patties are cooked on a griddle over a bed of onions and water, and they cook super fast thanks to the small holes punched in them. That last part was a suggestion made by employee Earl Howell in 1954, and it allows for a faster cook with no need to flip. Fast service at a good price is popular with all customers, but you might not expect vegans to be waiting in line at White Castle. They absolutely are, though, because this burger joint has been involved in one of the biggest recent vegan successes in fast food. White Castle began working on a plant-based patty with Impossible Foods back in 2017, and the Impossible Slider began popping up on White Castle menus at 140 locations in New York, New Jersey, and Chicago before going nationwide, becoming an instant hit. It's a hot date spot. White Castle has been marketing itself as a Valentine's Day destination for several years now, and it's been a major success. A whopping 35,000 reservations were expected for Valentine's Day festivities at participating restaurants in 2015. In addition to waiter service, decorations, and roses, the company even rolled out new menu items like bite-sized shrimp nibblers. Celebrating the love between you and your significant other at White Castle obviously isn't for everybody, but for couples with a sense of humor looking to keep it casual, the idea has been a big hit. The romance is so real, they've even hosted a wedding, and the happy couple tied the knot at an Indianapolis location in 2012. Hall of Fame. For those who have truly taken their love of burgers to the next level, the White Castle Cravers Hall of Fame awaits. Getting in isn't easy, and of the thousands who apply, just a handful are accepted. Anybody who feels they have a really good White Castle story or can prove their undying devotion is invited to apply, but their panel of judges only selects around a dozen applicants each year. Among some of the more famous names who can claim membership are the creators and actors of Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, and rocker Alice Cooper, who has loved the burgers since his childhood.
We're on this side of the Mississippi. If we pass a White Castle, we stop. So, this will go on the bus.
Harold and Kumar. White Castle had their time in the Hollywood spotlight with the 2004 movie Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, but it almost didn't happen. Screenwriters initially had the two friends searching for a Krispy Kreme location to satisfy their munchies, but when the donut chain backed out of the idea, a fictional hot dog stand was written in. Finally, they got in touch with White Castle executives, who loved the idea. Jamie Richardson, who was White Castle's director of marketing at the time, said, "It was like a love letter to White Castle." There's some truth to the fiction too. According to Foursquare, an impressive 21.5% of the chain's business happens between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. Who would have thought?
You know how all the popular eateries of today boast of fresh ingredients, unique toppings, and clean places? That's exactly how White Castle became famous. Yes, that same place where Harold and Kumar went to chow down on a ton of sliders was at one time the pinnacle of innovation and responsible for changing the entire way Americans eat. And they owe it all to a tiny hamburger. Here's what you don't know about White Castle's famous sliders.
Good morrow, sir, and welcome to the Castle of White.
The first fast food hamburger. McDonald's may be synonymous with fast food, but White Castle beat them to the punch by nearly 2 decades. In 1921, Billy Ingram and Walter Anderson decided to open a restaurant focusing on the relatively newfangled sandwich called the hamburger. After their first joint in Wichita, Kansas proved popular, they soon opened branches in El Dorado, Kansas, and Omaha, Nebraska, becoming the first hamburger fast food chain in the world. Why white? Thanks to shocking exposés like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, the meat industry had a bit of a bad name back in the day. To counter that, Ingram and Anderson decided they would show how pristine their operation was by painting the building white and using stainless steel on the inside so no stains could hide anywhere. The marketing gimmick worked, and White Castle was born. Burger design. White Castle had a secret to getting their burgers out quickly. They were wicked tiny. In fact, they're so thin, White Castle can make 18 of them with just 1 pound of beef. That allows them to be cooked faster. But originally, they still weren't being cooked fast enough. White Castle pioneered the art of searing both sides of the burger to keep the flavor in, something other chains like Five Guys and Steak 'n Shake later emulated, but it still took too long to cook them. So in the early 1950s, a White Castle cook from Cincinnati by the name of Earl Howell suggested they poke little holes in the patties to cook them faster. It worked, leading to the burgers you know and love today. Onion time. White Castle used to flip their burgers, but like searing, it just took too much time. So now they simply put the burger on top of a pile of onions and let the burger cook via onion steam. They then lock in that steam bath by plopping the bottom bun on the burger while it's still cooking. It's this onion method that gives White Castle sliders their unique taste, as each burger ends up paired with roughly 2 ounces of rehydrated onions, just enough to provide that special flavor. The burger content. White Castle boldly claims they use 100% beef, which is nice, even though it doesn't mean a whole lot. Ground beef can be any cut of cow, though the Department of Agriculture says it can't have more than 30% fat. So how much fat does White Castle beef have exactly? Each tiny slider packs 6 grams of fat, 2.5 of which is saturated. And with all that fat comes the calories, with 140 a slider. So if you pick up a Crave case of 30 sliders, you're looking at almost 4,200 calories. Science. In the 1930s, hamburgers had a bad reputation, so White Castle co-founder Billy Ingram commissioned University of Minnesota physiological chemistry professor Jesse McClendon to do a study proving White Castle burgers were safe to eat. Test subject Bernard Flesch, a med student at the university, spent the next 13 weeks eating only White Castle burgers and survived the experience intact. The study, Ingram said, showed that people could eat nothing but our sandwiches and water and fully develop all physical and mental faculties. Flesch later became a doctor and died of heart problems at age 54, and according to his daughter, he never willingly ate hamburgers again. They have a food truck. There are just over 400 White Castle locations spread across only 13 states, so there's a pretty good chance you've never had a White Castle slider. Luckily, there's a solution. The White Castle Crave-Mobile food truck, which drives around the country selling sliders outside events like fairs or NASCAR races. In 2015, they parked outside the Orlando theme park Fun Spot and sold over 10,000 sliders in a single day. And if you can't find the food truck, you can also check your local supermarket, as White Castle is the nation's top distributor of frozen burgers. They're exactly the same as the burgers in the restaurants, but you'll have to supply your own pickle. Sliders. Even if you're the biggest White Castle fan in the world, you might be spelling their signature burger wrong. Technically, the trademark term is sliders, though even White Castle doesn't always remember to use that silly Y, referring to them on their own website as the original slider. Harold and Kumar go to Krispy Kreme. Let's be real, when you hear White Castle, you think Harold and Kumar. But that almost never happened because the movie's producers first approached Krispy Kreme instead. They declined though, as something about a couple kids stoned out of their minds apparently didn't sit well with the image they wanted to sell donuts. Instead, White Castle stepped in and etched their name into pop culture history.
Damn, that hit the spot.
That was the best meal of my life.
Fast food burgers just aren't as cheap as they used to be. The New York Post estimates that fast food burger prices have climbed as much as 54% over the last decade or so. This is largely due to the emergence of fast casual restaurants and pricier burger chains like Shake Shack and Five Guys. But even if you've only got a few bucks to spare, White Castle can definitely cover your burger cravings. And you can still afford to buy fries and a drink to boot.
Monsieur requires a bit of refinement.
Come on!
Perhaps an A1 slider?
Stupid!
And a stiff cola for me?
White Castle sliders might not be as cheap as they were back when the brand first came onto the scene in 1921. After all, you could buy 5 sliders for a dime back in the day. But they're definitely still a bargain, you have to admit. According to fast food menu prices, a White Castle customer can buy a classic slider for just 72 cents and a cheese slider for 90 cents. Today's slider is almost double the price it was in 1990, but a McDonald's hamburger in 1990 still costs twice as much as a White Castle slider in 2020. There's an obvious reason why White Castle's food is so cheap: the size. You won't find any half-pound burgers at White Castle, and they never jumped on the fast food supersize bandwagon. Even today, their fry sizes are kids, small, and medium. So how does White Castle keep prices so low? The long and short of it is the fact that the company believes in keeping things small. Small stores, small menu, and a nearly non-existent advertising presence. In 1991, White Castle's then Director of Marketing, Christopher Thomas, said the brand was committed to primarily doing one thing: selling burgers. As he put it, "We're a hamburger chain. We've never digressed from that. That's where some of the others got lost, in chicken, pizza, pasta. They want every dollar out there." In 2019, CEO Lisa Ingram reiterated that belief to CNBC, saying that,
"This model has worked well for us for almost 100 years.
Here's another interesting tidbit. White Castle doesn't franchise its restaurants. Even when franchise investors cover a significant portion of the cost, franchising is usually incredibly expensive for restaurant chains. According to Yahoo Small Business, White Castle avoids this expense by keeping its stores all company-owned and keeping them near its distribution facilities. This strategy helps keep prices down. White Castle also makes sure its suppliers are within arm's reach of a restaurant. And who are White Castle's suppliers? White Castle, naturally. The burger chain doesn't turn to outside suppliers for their food product. It has its own bakery and its own meat processing plant. That's so smart. According to White Castle's official website, the Evandale, Ohio bakery produces over 500,000 slider buns a week, and it's done so for over 50 years. Since 2001, the burger chain has also produced millions of slider patties each year in its Zanesville, Ohio meat processing plant. While White Castle might not have its own beef farms, the company is still saving money because it doesn't rely on an outside meat processing plant to produce its uniquely squared slider patties. The closer you look at the White Castle operation, the more one fact becomes abundantly clear. These people are control freaks. That's a good thing though, because it means lower prices and a consistent product. White Castle is strict about keeping everything in-house, and it doesn't rely on outside contractors to make its kitchen equipment. Instead of paying an outside metal manufacturer to make the specialized kitchen equipment for its restaurants, White Castle has its own 250,000 square foot metal fabrication plant in Ohio. The White Castle subsidiary, known as PSB Company, makes everything from the kitchen tools and cooking fixtures to the restaurant's seating. It probably would have been easier to hire a third party to handle this, but White Castle founder Billy Ingram reportedly insisted that things be done in a precise way. In 1934, he personally commissioned the building of the metal fabrication plant. So what's the takeaway here? Long story short, White Castle can keep the prices of its sliders low because they've built a business they're nearly 100% in control of. Again, that's so smart and so simple.
Simply delicious.
Don't be fooled by White Castle's blind cult following. There are still some items you should definitely steer clear of next time you find yourself face to face with a menu at the tiny burger joint, either because they're unhealthy or because they're just plain gross. Do you have an intense hatred for onions or anything remotely onion related? Then White Castle's beef sliders might not be for you, no matter how good you've heard they are. Sure, you can say hold the onions, but that will never remove the slider's rooted onion essence. White Castle steams its beef patties over a pile of onions. They spread onions over the grill, then put the patties on top. The distinct 5 holes in the meat patties are a signature of White Castle. The holes help the cooking process, which is to steam rather than grill like you would a traditional hamburger patty. The buns soak up the onion steam too, hence the reason why they're so nice and pillowy, and also very greasy. The preparation process isn't a deal breaker for everyone, but it probably is for the world's onion haters. What's wrong with a side of chicken rings, other than the overall principle that you shouldn't ever have the option to wear meat on your finger? First off, they contain an eye-popping 47 grams of fat and 610 milligrams of sodium. But if you really can't bear the thought of never enjoying fried chicken rib meat somehow formed into a circle, definitely put your heart first and go instead with a chicken ring slider, which contains way less fat than an entire side order of rings. Chicken rings might do a real number on your stomach too. If you need further evidence, there's an entire Yelp review page dedicated to Chicago residents lamenting the difficulties the rings have caused for their intestines. Aside from the fact that fish nibblers sound like something you put in an aquarium for your goldfish to munch on, these fried balls of fast food fish sticks come with a whopping 1,300 milligrams of sodium if you order a medium. Excessive sodium intake on a regular basis doesn't just mean your rings won't fit, as over time it can also lead to high blood pressure. However, not everything at White Castle is a sodium bomb. A small side of French fries will only set you back 50 milligrams of sodium.
Sodium. Well, if you don't know anything about sodium now, I don't know what else we can do for you.
Yeah. White Castle uses Alaska pollock, which is a less expensive alternative to cod or haddock for its fish nibblers. While Alaska pollock isn't the worst fish you could eat, the way White Castle prepares it sort of jacks away all the health benefits. The nibblers are breaded and deep fried, then served with a side of packaged tartar sauce, whose 5th main ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. The White Castle nutrition breakdown lists over 30 ingredients in the fish nibblers, including vegetable oil shortening and something called shrimp powder. While undoubtedly delicious and sure to satisfy someone super hungry, hungover, or both, the double cheese slider combo is basically a heart attack in a sack. Just one of the double stack sliders has 17 grams of fat and 940 milligrams of sodium, and this combo comes with 2. When you include the fries that come with it, the entire meal has 950 calories. But that's based on White Castle's wise decision to calculate the total calories if the drink in the combo is a small Diet Coke. If someone gets a larger regular Coke, you can add on another 260 to 500 calories. Some options that are way healthier include the original slider, the cheese slider, or a plain savory grilled chicken slider. Bacon or sausage? What's a hungry person to do when faced with a decision so intense and so early in the morning? Well, at White Castle, you can just get both in one meal. Assuming you don't have a marathon to run the next day, it's highly unlikely you need the entire 1,130 calories that make up the 2 breakfast toast sandwich combo meal. Beyond the 2 sandwiches, which come with your choice of egg, American cheese, and either sausage or bacon, this breakfast offering includes a side of hash brown nibblers and coffee. If you're going to get breakfast at White Castle and want to save yourself some calories, order something that comes with the signature tiny buns, like the bacon, egg, and cheese slider.
Robots, listeria, and calories, oh my. The kingdom of White Castle holds many secrets you never knew about. One glance at a White Castle restaurant is all the proof you need to see that the white in its name is quite literal. Seems unusual for a food brand that broke into the market with a bold, novel idea to gloss over catchy color options in favor of plain old white, doesn't it? Well, the color choice wasn't without reason, as the events that led to it began years prior to the chain's launch. In 1906, Upton Sinclair, a reform-minded novelist, released The Jungle, a book painting a graphic portrait of the health situation, terrible working conditions, and immigrant exploitation in America's meatpacking industry. The Jungle was so impactful that it started a cultural shift encouraging most people to avoid ground meat. When White Castle opened shop in 1921, people still weren't very big on processed meats.
You know what's going down your throat, man? Big chunks of hamburger, you know? Big gobs, like dog food, dog friskies, doggy yummies. You know something, Joey? He's gonna turn into a dog.
Hamburgers were already associated with filth, so White Castle had a huge responsibility to prove that everything about the brand was clean. White is about as clean as can be, so White Castle opted for both the name and color. They even went a step further and made sure the interior featured easily cleanable stainless steel, as per Consumerist. Jamie Richardson, a vice president at White Castle, told Dayton.com that Billy Ingram was so particular about a clean appearance that he'd bring out a manager if Ingram found so much as a speck of dirt on a counter. The idea of fast food was created to provide customers with a warm, tasty, on-the-go meal in short order. Early on, White Castle's founders had to balance the price of their goods with the quick turnaround and value that fast food offered to the American population, most of whom hadn't yet experienced it.
No soup today, huh? Who says Daddy Frank doesn't take care of you?
Upon opening in 1921, a White Castle burger cost 5 cents, according to QSR. Despite the spikes of inflation in the early 20s, the average change in inflation was so small that the brand could afford to keep the price of its menu constant. A White Castle burger still sold for just 10 cents at the turn of the 1950s. Yet price changes were inevitable. By the 80s, White Castle prices had risen almost threefold, with a burger selling for 27 cents. As of November 2022, the average price of an original slider, according to fast food menu prices, is 72 cents. Yet that's not the whole story. While it may seem that White Castle sliders have gotten increasingly expensive, the actual cost of the slider has not changed dramatically. The inflation rate since 1921 has gone up 1,384.04%, according to the CPI inflation calculator. In short, that means that the spending power of 5 cents in the first years of White Castle is roughly equal to 74 cents now. Ultimately, your White Castle sliders cost nearly the same as they always have. World War II was tough on all businesses, and fast food certainly was no exception. When United States service members began to engage in active combat, the government had to resort to rationing, as the National World War II Museum reports. Each citizen got a certain number of ration points based on their age, estimated nutritional needs, and whether or not they were deemed to be essential workers. The ration points restricted how much of a certain item a consumer could buy, with the idea that there'd be enough left over for others, especially those in the military. In 1943, as Cook's Info notes, beef and other meats joined the growing list of food items to be rationed. In a rather ominous turn, this meant that making hamburgers wasn't feasible for White Castle anymore. What was a growing fast food restaurant to do? In a desperate effort to keep the doors open, White Castle attempted to make burgers out of everything but ground beef. The brand tried fish burgers, soy burgers, baked bean burgers, and even chili burgers, as per Cook's Info. Some of these ideas at least kept the doors open, but people weren't buying the burger reinvention in the long run. Customers were so unenthused that by the end of the war in 1945, White Castle had closed down about 1/3 of its outlets and raised hamburger prices by 100%. A signature characteristic of the White Castle slider is the 5-hole puncture visible in the burger patties. The holes are probably the easiest way to tell a White Castle slider apart from the competition, and there's a really good reason why they're part of the patty. According to Thrillist, the punctures are strategically placed to help the burgers cook faster. Slider patties are steamed rather than grilled, and they are placed atop a bed of onions as they cook. The structure of the patties allows that steam and onion flavor to permeate the meat. Better still, the holes in the patties allow them to be fully cooked without having to be flipped. So where did this genius idea come from? The hold patties were the brainchild of White Castle Cincinnati's Earl Howell, according to Thrillist. He came up with the idea while trying to grill burgers faster in 1954, and this method was more efficient and tasty than Earl or anyone else expected.
The White Castle employee who did everything right!
Soon enough, all other White Castle restaurants adopted the technique. It became so important that White Castle obtained a patent on that method for cooking burger patties. It's clear that, although he was a seemingly humble hamburger flipper from Cincinnati, Howell single-handedly changed the course of a multi-million-dollar food chain with his idea. His reward? As company vice president Jamie Richardson told Thrillist, a picture in the Employee Hall of Fame at the White Castle headquarters. White Castle is the first known fast food restaurant to offer takeout services, with Billy Ingram's Buy 'em by the Sack campaign in 1927, according to a 2021 press release. The campaign name was taken from the slogan coined by Walter Anderson, which encouraged customers to buy sliders in bulk at a reduced price. The strategy has remained effective, pushing White Castle to continually repackage its sliders into newer, cuter boxes. Instead of just slider bags, White Castle restaurants now sell a Crave Clutch, Crave Case, and Crave Crate, as the White Castle menu boasts. White Castle has long abandoned any attempts to disprove how unhealthy its sliders are, and the company isn't big on putting nutritional information at the forefront. The 100-slider Crave Crate of White Castle's most nutritious offering, for example, has about 14,000 calories in it. With an average requirement of 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day for an adult, according to Very Well Fit, a Crave Crate has as many calories as the average person would need for an entire week. All of this eye-popping nutritional information is reportedly public, but White Castle appears to deal in technicalities because that data is contained in a crowded, barely visible table that takes a bit of detective work to find on the White Castle website. For its first 93 years of business, White Castle simply didn't cater to vegetarians, except for the time the restaurant was pushed to do so by a global war. But aside from that, the brand was all about beef, and it seemed to have little intention of exploring any vegetarian options with its burgers. There was likely little push for meat-free sliders from customers too, since vegetarianism in the US was not as popular for much of the 20th century as it is today, according to the New York Historical Society. Vegetarians and vegans simply didn't make up a large enough sector of the market to be a profitable customer base for White Castle. Things began to change in the 21st century, however. White Castle made one of its largest publicity moves of all time in 2004 when it was featured in the comedy Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. Kal Penn, who played Kumar, is vegetarian, which means that food workers on set had to craft veggie burgers for him to consume on screen, as he told Business Insiders.
I want 30 sliders, 5 French fries, and 4 large cherry cokes.
I want the same, except make mine Diet Cokes.
For every vegetarian who wasn't a film actor, though, it was tough luck for a few more years. White Castle finally saw the changing tide and officially released veggie sliders for sale in December 2014. After that, sliders made from Impossible beef, known as Impossible Sliders, debuted in 2018. Back in 1931, White Castle innovated the sale of frozen burgers, as per refrigerated and frozen foods. The idea came from customers who used to pack burgers on dry ice and send them across the country. By the late 80s, the frozen version of the burgers had gotten so popular that White Castle had to move them into retail groceries, where they fast became one of America's best-selling frozen food brands. For a company built on strict cleanliness and high quality, one would assume that White Castle would soar without the messy quality control problems of the frozen food world, but boy were we wrong. In December 2019, a quality assurance test at an external laboratory found proof that a batch of frozen White Castle sliders may have been contaminated by listeria, according to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The evidence of contamination was solid enough for the brand to voluntarily recall that entire batch of frozen sliders. The company also halted all shipping from the factory where the bacteria was detected and increased sanitation measures for its frozen food production, according to ABC News. White Castle has come a long way, from building the first fast food assembly line to investing in high-tech burger making. During the COVID-19 pandemic, its kitchens had to deal with fewer people while also making burgers at a fast rate, so the chain sped up its technology investments. White Castle partnered with Pasadena's Miso Robotics as the first fast food chain to test Flippy, a machine that uses AI technology to flip burgers, cook fries, and help out with other repetitive kitchen tasks. According to USA Today, Flippy got into a bit of a mess in 2018 when it started to churn out burgers at a faster rate than the human kitchen workers could manage. Even so, White Castle took a chance on an improved version of Flippy in 2020, according to TechCrunch. As Today reports, in early 2022, it put the upgraded version, Flippy 2, in 100 additional White Castle restaurants. Depending on where you order, there's a chance that your next White Castle slider will be made by a Flippy.
The White Castle menu goes far beyond the basic slider. There are at least 16 different ways you can order a slider at White Castle locations. And while some are worthy of a long drive, others shouldn't exist. Here's our take on them, from worst to best.
There's a White Castle that's open 24 hours up in Cherry Hill. It's about 45 minutes from here. I can make the trip if you're willing to.
The Surf and Turf slider was once merely a secret menu item, but now some locations have this double-decker creation on their regular menu, though you might have to order via the White Castle app to get it. If your local White Castle doesn't have it on the menu, just order a double cheese slider and a fish slider with no bun, then put it together for yourself. However, unless you want to complete an exercise in absolute disgust, or are just trying to achieve some street cred, there is absolutely no reason to order this, because it just doesn't taste good. The fish patty is thick and oily, the beef patties are too thin, and the combination just doesn't go together. We do not recommend it. The plain fish slider at White Castle is better than the travesty of the Surf and Turf, but not by much. The patty is made from Alaskan pollock and is very thick and flaky, but unfortunately the outside is not at all crisp. The flavor isn't overly fishy per se, but it has the consistency of fish meal. It doesn't have the same satisfying crunch and fresh flavor as the Filet-O-Fish from McDonald's. So if you're a fan of that sandwich, don't go to White Castle in search of a smaller equivalent. You can get it with or without cheese, but unfortunately, White Castle doesn't offer tartar sauce, which we think is a big mistake. Bottom line, this is the kind of fish sandwich that makes people think they don't like seafood.
No, dude, this isn't happening, all right? We didn't make it here and now we're broke. No!
The chicken ring is a classic of the White Castle menu. Similar to a chicken nugget, it's a ring-shaped, deep-fried white meat chicken product. The chicken ring slider takes 2 of them and puts them on one of the chain's classic slider buns. Like all of their sliders, you can order the sandwich with or without cheese. Neither option is particularly good. Every bite of the chicken ring slider is approximately 80% bread, which is just too much bread. The texture of the chicken ring, which can be decently crisp or disappointingly soggy depending on the day, does not play well with the soft slider bun in either case. If you are a fan of White Castle's chicken rings, your best bet is to order them as a side. We initially had pretty high hopes for White Castle's Impossible slider, especially because the Impossible offerings at other fast food chains are so reliably good. Not so with this item of vegetarian fast food. One of the most disconcerting things about White Castle's Impossible slider was that from the moment you take it out of its cardboard sleeve, you know this is fake meat. It lacks the satisfying meaty bite of other Impossible patties, and the lack of any kind of sauce besides ketchup is a miss. If you're going to order this, we might suggest adding some ranch too, but there's really no need except to satiate curiosity when the much better vegetable slider exists to serve vegetarian-leaning White Castle customers. Chicken and waffles has become a classic of American cuisine, so it's no surprise that White Castle made their own contribution in the form of the chicken and waffle slider.
Did you know Holland invented chicken and waffles? Really? Before that, you can only get chicken or waffles, but they were the first to put them together.
The menu claims that the chicken breast should be covered in a creamy country gravy, then topped with bacon and sandwiched between 2 miniature Belgian waffles. Unfortunately, stores are inconsistent in terms of whether or not they serve gravy, which is both a good and a bad thing. On the one hand, the gravy does make the sandwich a little less dry, which is one of its biggest problems. On the other hand, the gravy is more or less a flavorless gray goop. The chicken breast itself is marginally better than the chicken rings, but the waffles are extremely sweet, and because of that, they don't play well with the chicken. If you're dying to try one of White Castle's waffle sliders, choose literally any other. Let's talk a little more about those miniature Belgian waffles that form the basis of many of the items on White Castle's all-day breakfast menu. For starters, they are extremely sweet, which won't be a problem for some, but will be extremely off-putting to others. What will be a problem for almost everyone, though, is the fact that 8 times out of 10, these waffles come out totally soggy. If you get a soggy pair of waffles, your sandwich will lack structural integrity, which will make it very hard to eat. Such is the case with the Belgian waffle slider, which has no patty to hold it together. White Castle cracks an actual egg for every one of their breakfast sandwiches. However, this particular one is a mess to eat, and the flavors are all over the place. The double original slider from White Castle is basically a double cheese slider, hold the cheese. It's made with 2 of the chain's original beef patties on a triple-decker slider bun, and topped with chopped onion, ketchup, and notably, a single pickle. This slider is a study in how to mess up a good thing by completely ignoring the concept of keeping a sandwich proportional. If the toppings were on both slider patties, this might be better, but the flavors and textures are lost in too much meat and way too much bread. The whole thing has the texture of taking a giant bite of toothpaste, which is to say, it's pretty unpleasant. The primary thing you taste is bread. There is something very pure about White Castle's egg and cheese waffle slider, which is basically the Belgian waffle slider without meat. It tastes like the kind of thing you would order for a child who is both a picky eater and has a small appetite. This breakfast slider is very bland, but in an oddly good way. It's also the kind of thing you might want to eat if you've had a long night, aren't feeling great, and want something that is all at once small, filling, and plain. The White Castle Egg and Cheese Waffle Slider is exactly that thing. It is not the best thing on their menu, but it is also not the worst. Unlike the chicken ring slider, the crispy chicken slider at White Castle is made from all white meat chicken breast that is battered, deep-fried, and topped with cheese. While the chicken has a decent amount of flavor, it's quite dry, and the melted cheese on top somehow makes the whole slider experience feel even drier. This sandwich would be greatly improved by the presence of a pickle perhaps, or some kind of spicy barbecue sauce, but in its standard iteration, it falls fairly flat. That said, it's solidly in the middle of the pack of White Castle sliders overall. And if you get a particularly crisp piece of chicken on a particularly fresh slider bun, order a side of sauce, and you've got a decent little chicken sandwich on your hands. The double cheese slider is significantly better than the original double slider, which is proof that 2 slices of cheese can make a whole world of difference. All of White Castle sliders can be ordered with either American, cheddar, or jalapeno cheese slices. For this particular sandwich, we recommend going with the jalapeno cheese, which has a surprising amount of spice that keeps us from becoming too bland. Because there is a slice of cheese on each beef patty, the fact that there are only additional toppings on the top layer isn't as much of an issue as it is with the original double. If you like the bigger bite and additional slice of bread that a double-decker sandwich offers, the double cheese slider with jalapeno cheese is as good as it gets at White Castle, though we wouldn't say no to the same with either American or cheddar. When it comes to the White Castle breakfast menu, there are sliders served on tiny waffles and sliders served on the same mini buns as the rest of the sandwiches on offer. The original slider with egg and cheese is not quite as good as its waffle counterpart, but it's pretty okay. It features an original steamed grilled beef patty on a bed of chopped onions, just like the classic original slider, but then it takes it up a notch and adds egg and cheese. We do miss the delightful spicy quality of the breakfast sausage patty on the sandwich, so if you like your breakfast with a little extra kick, we recommend that you get it with jalapeno cheese instead of American or cheddar. The sausage, egg, and cheese waffle slider is one of the best items on the entire menu at White Castle, and is a standout of the breakfast menu. Anchored solidly by the sausage patty, this sandwich is much easier to eat than the bacon, egg, and cheese version, which can be prone to falling apart. The sausage patty is not only salty, it also has a delightfully spicy kick to it that does the best job of balancing out those cake batter flavored waffles. The bite starts out sweet and finishes spicy, and there's a great textural balance between the sausage, melted cheese, fried egg, and miniature waffles. On the best day, this is better and cheaper than what you would get at some high-end brunch places. Even if you end up with a lukewarm and not particularly crisp version, this is a pretty good sandwich. If you're a fan of sweet and savory breakfast sandwiches, this one is a must-try. The bacon cheese slider at White Castle does just about everything you want it to do. It gets a little extra salt and crunch from the bacon strips, which are, it feels important to note, real bacon and not bacon crumbles or bits, delightfully gooey melted cheese, and everything we love about White Castle's original slider. This is a sandwich with great mouthfeel, balanced flavors, and just the right amount of decadence. It earns particularly high marks for highlighting the flavor of the beef patty rather than simply burying it in toppings, and for the fact that all of the toppings are portioned so that they complement one another rather than competing for real estate on your taste buds. The veggie slider is one of the sleeper hits of the White Castle menu, and is absolutely a better choice for anyone who wants to take a break from eating meat than the chain's Impossible slider. One of the most surprising things about this patty is the fact that you can actually see the vegetables it's made from, like carrots, peas, and soybeans. It's also delicious, with a crisp exterior, a soft interior, and an overall flavor that's vaguely reminiscent of a mildly spicy pakora. It has a good balance of texture, and the relatively bland flavor of the slider bun actually highlights the flavors of the vegetables that make up the patty. This slider is not served with any toppings or sauces, and it doesn't really need any, although it's pretty good with both ketchup and ranch if either of those are your thing. The original slider from White Castle is an icon and a classic for one reason and one reason only. It's good. Even if you don't like fast food, even if you don't love burgers, there is something about the square steamed grilled patty and how it mingles with the chopped onions, ketchup, and singular perfect pickle that makes this one hit the spot every time. The chain's signature soft, pillowy bun is the perfect vehicle for the single beef patty, so each bite has the perfect ratio of bread, meat, and toppings. It's also gone in an instant, which is why most people order a sack full of original sliders when they make the trip to a White Castle. If you have never tried one before, get yourself to the nearest location, put your preconceived notions of what is and isn't a good burger to the side, and give this one a try. We promise that even skeptics are highly likely to find themselves pleasantly surprised. The only thing better than a White Castle original slider is a White Castle cheese slider. Take everything we just said that makes the original slider great: the depth of flavor of the onion-infused steamed grilled beef patty, the sweetness of ketchup, the tang and crunch of a pickle slice, that buttery slider roll, and then add a slice of perfectly melted cheese to the equation. It takes this sandwich to a whole new level. The cheese slider is great with cheddar, American, or jalapeno cheese added. But since we tend to like things a little more on the spicy side, we think this slider is best ordered with jalapeno cheese. We also think that this cheese melts better than the other two options on the White Castle menu, which earns it extra points. We could go for a dozen or so just thinking about how good these little burgers really are.
Damn, that hit the spot.
That was the best meal of my life.
White Castle's iconic slider changed how Americans viewed hamburgers and fast food. The famous fast food eatery has always focused on quality over quantity, and its menu changes have been few but significant. Here's what happens in White Castle menu history the year you were born. White Castle opened up its first location in Wichita, Kansas in 1921. The idea was to create a restaurant where diners could enjoy the then unfamiliar taste of the hamburger and also enjoy a spotless atmosphere and quick and polite service. The founders of White Castle hoped to change the reputation of ground beef, which was at the time extremely poor. That reputation was entrenched by works like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, a 1906 novel that depicted the beef industry as highly unsanitary. Upon opening, the first White Castle menu was exceptionally simple, with only 4 items. This allowed for greater quality control. Those delicious White Castle sliders were the only entree available, with Coca-Cola and coffee to drink and apple pie for dessert. The tiny burger patties were made small in order to speed up the cooking process and seal in the meat's natural juices. Though the vintage patties look relatively familiar to White Castle sliders of today, there were a few key differences. Back then, the raw patty was cooked directly on a grill and flipped, as opposed to today's steam and set method. The sliders were then topped with diced onions, salt, and pepper, and then placed on a bun and dropped in a sack. Diners also had the option of adding other toppings, such as pickles, cheese, lettuce, and tomato. White Castle did well throughout the Great Depression, growing its number of restaurants to more than 100 and inspiring knockoff brands to follow their lead. Unfortunately, World War II presented serious challenges to the chain. Sliders, Coke, and coffee made up more than half of White Castle's menu at the time. But when the US government began rationing sugar, coffee, and meat during the war, it became difficult to maintain the old menu. White Castle turned to other menu items to pick up the slack. In addition to sliders, customers could also order fried egg sandwiches, hot dogs, grilled cheese sandwiches, and baked beans. White Castle also offered French fries for the first time. As for the sliders, they received a slight change due to an onion shortage. Rather than use fresh onions on the burgers, White Castle began using more widely available dehydrated onions. While the chain abandoned most of these menu changes after the war, it kept the dehydrated onions. Once World War II was over and servicemen came back to their jobs, White Castle was not quite out of its difficult years. Food shortages were still an issue, as was finding employees. During this time, one innovative White Castle operator in Cincinnati named Earl Howell made a big change to the way his location made its sliders. The result was a better burger for a lower cost. In order to get more sliders from a single pound of beef, the operator cut down the size of the sandwiches and then drilled 5 holes into each patty. Not only did this save cash, but it enhanced the burger's flavor, as the patty's juices were better retained and it made the burger cook faster. It also meant shorter wait times for hungry customers. Around the same time, White Castle also switched from cooking its patties directly on the grill and then topping them with onions, to piling up the onions on the grill first and then layering the patties on top. This cooked the meat with steam, and the method is still in use today. By the 1950s, White Castle was certainly not the only major fast food player on the scene. Other chains were thriving, and soon McDonald's and Burger King would both take off. Other competitors included Steak and Shake, Howard Johnson's, and Bob's Big Boy. What gave these restaurants a potential edge over White Castle? They all believed in franchising, something White Castle still refuses to do. White Castle's owners realized that they needed to stay ahead of the curve, so they decided to expand the chain's stalwart menu in ways only previously done out of sheer necessity. White Castle looked to previous successes from World War II for inspiration and found French fries, which it added back to the menu. The chain also tried out milkshakes for the first time. The 2 menu changes were successful. You can still find both of these options at White Castle today. Most know the story of McDonald's Filet-O-Fish and how it was added to the menu as an effort to attract Catholic customers who couldn't eat meat on Fridays. However, McDonald's was not the first to come up with this concept. Instead, White Castle was at the forefront of the fast food fish sandwich trend, offering it in an effort to attract Catholic customers during the Korean War. The fish sandwiches were only available on Fridays, but they proved relatively successful. However, White Castle did not make them a permanent menu item at the time. Today, however, you can get a White Castle fish slider with a breaded fish patty, tartar sauce, and cheese served on the same steamed buns that are used for the regular sliders. Beyond the innovation of fish sandwiches, White Castle was still having success with its very limited menu, and in 1961, the chain sold its billionth burger. When White Castle makes a menu change, it doesn't fool around. The brand takes things very seriously, as evidenced by how slowly the menu has changed over the years. In 1962, White Castle would make its very first permanent entree menu addition that was not the result of wartime shortages. It would not make another menu change for 2 decades. The big change? White Castle released a cheeseburger. Appearing 41 years after the original White Castle slider, the cheeseburger was an exact replica of the regular slider, with its onions and pickles, only with the addition of a miniature slice of cheese. The menu edition was a success, and the cheeseburger remained. In 1986, White Castle decided to head into the world of fast food breakfast. As such, it was decided that all of its offerings would be made to order, using only freshly cracked eggs, unlike the liquid and frozen eggs that you find at other fast food chains. White Castle's first breakfast sandwich was a breakfast slider with egg and cheese, along with the customer's choice of sausage or bacon, all served on the same steam bun that you get with the regular slider. The sandwich would be the lone breakfast menu item until 2011, when White Castle launched a toast sandwich. The menu change accompanied certain other, larger changes for the brand, such as the launch of its frozen line of hamburgers in 1987 and its introduction of drive-thrus in 1980. By the late 1980s, White Castle had begun testing out new menu items on a small scale, partially thanks to new leadership that included E.W. Ingram III, the co-founder's grandson. Tested menu items included chicken nuggets and double burgers, which, in the vein of the McDonald's Big Mac, takes 2 patties and wedges a third layer of bread between them, with extra toppings to go along with the extra patty. However, White Castle realized that its customer base was aging. They weren't attracting a younger audience. In an effort to attract a new generation, they introduced a kids' meal, the Castle Meal. This new menu item came with 1 slider, fries, a drink, and a prize, all in a cardboard castle. The effort increased sales with both kids and parents. While the 1990s were quiet for White Castle, the next 2 decades would present an ever-growing menu and a rotating selection of seasonal and promotional items. It all started in 2001, when White Castle introduced its Crave Case, a case of 30 sliders. White Castle also introduced its Cravers Hall of Fame and inducted its inaugural class of Cravers. Some of these famous inductees included Alice Cooper, Stan Lee, and of course John Cho and Cal Penn. Stars of the cult hit Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
You guys kept talking about White Castle last night so much it made me start to crave it too.
Over the years, the Crave Case experience has evolved, like when White Castle launched Crave Copters to deliver cases via drone. In 2020, the company realized that not everyone necessarily needs 30 sliders at once, and so introduced the Crave Clutch, with 20 sliders to the box. In 2002, White Castle changed up the chicken game with the introduction of this rather untraditional fast food item. It was a great success, as White Castle chicken rings now have something of a cult following. In an effort to compete against chicken options at other fast food restaurants, the chicken rings are available 2 ways: as a slider that includes 2 chicken rings on the bun and topped with the cheese of your choice, or as a side. Variations of the chicken rings over the years have included flavored and pretzel-coated chicken rings, but the original rings remain a reliable menu item at White Castle, much to cravers' delight. Some have even gone so far as to propose using chicken rings, or have exchanged the tasty treats at their weddings. In 2011, White Castle finally expanded its breakfast menu with the introduction of a new egg and toast sandwich. The new menu item went beyond the simple breakfast slider, while still holding true to its values and focus on high-quality and freshly cracked eggs. But the White Castle egg and toast sandwich wasn't just unique in that it was a new breakfast menu item. Its uniqueness also lay in the fact that the egg and toast sandwich was one of White Castle's only normal-sized items. Deviating away from its precious slider buns, White Castle introduced the sandwich with standard toast, a fried egg, and a choice of bacon or sausage. Simple, easy, and with a decidedly nice crunch that the breakfast sliders lacked, the toast sandwich was a hit. Today, you can enjoy this meal with a combo of 2 toast sandwiches, including a side of round, miniature hash browns and coffee. In 2014, White Castle took breakfast to a whole other level with Belgian waffle breakfast sliders, something that was intended as a promotional item only, but which soon became a permanent part of the menu. What exactly is it? An imported Belgian waffle straight from Brussels, as well as a fresh egg, cheese, and a choice of bacon or sausage. In addition to the Belgian waffle breakfast sliders, White Castle has also offered a variety of other Belgian waffle sandwich menu items since. These include a chicken and waffle slider with a breaded chicken breast, bacon bits, and country gravy that was considered part of the lunch/dinner menu rather than a breakfast item. White Castle also made its first foray into the world of meat alternatives in 2014 with the introduction of its veggie slider. Featuring a Dr. Praeger's veggie burger made from vegetables such as carrots and spinach, the burgers were grilled and then placed on a slider bun, instead of being cooked White Castle's usual way. With the hit and the Belgian waffle breakfast slider on its hands, White Castle finally made the decision to go all day with its breakfast. Previously, customers could only order items like Belgian waffle breakfast sliders during certain hours. They called the new all-day breakfast menu its Anything, Anytime menu. White Castle didn't offer its full breakfast options 24/7, but it did provide some of its most popular options, like its original slider with egg and cheese. They also included a newer item that featured a hamburger slider topped with egg, cheese, and onion, but sans pickle. The decision wasn't necessarily groundbreaking on White Castle's part, however. The menu change came along with similar menu updates around the country, as when McDonald's began all-day breakfast the same year. Still, compared to other fast food joints, White Castle's all-day breakfast makes it stand out from the pack. In 2018, White Castle became the first fast food chain to offer the plant-based Impossible Burger in the form of the Impossible Slider. The burgers look, taste, and bleed like real meat. Each Impossible Slider was topped with smoked cheddar cheese, pickles, and onions. As much as vegetarians may have been interested, reviews of the new slider were uneven at best. While reviews weren't always kind, the vegetarian Impossible Slider was certainly beloved by many, as White Castle sales exceeded expectations. But White Castle was still leaving out one group of consumers that fast food restaurants have a knack for overlooking: vegans. That slice of cheese topping the Impossible Slider was made out of dairy after all. So what was the next step? Top a meat-free slider with dairy-free cheese, of course. White Castle became the first fast food hamburger chain in the United States to offer a dairy-free alternative to cheddar cheese. In the almost 20 years they've been in existence, chicken rings have stealthily achieved status as a unique and immediately recognizable fast food icon. Here's everything you need to know about the signature item most identified with White Castle after its legendary sliders. Judging by the lack of searchable information surrounding the invention of White Castle's chicken rings, you'd think that they were immaculately conceived. In the absence of a dedicated chicken ring backstory, White Castle produced a viral video based on a long-standing urban myth about O-shaped chickens that ran around with gaping holes in their middles. In reality, what is known about these iconic rings, made from 100% white chicken meat, is that they were initially launched by White Castle in 2002. Although they can also be ordered between two buns as a slider, they've been most popular as a side. Available in 3, 6, 9, and 20-piece servings, their high dunkability rating explains why they're accompanied by a variety of dipping sauces. Hamburgers ruled the fast food roost until the late 1970s. In 1977, the US government released its first ever dietary guidelines, which advised Americans to consume less fat and red meat. As a consequence, consumers panicked, and burger sales plummeted. Fast food chains frantically searched for a less threatening alternative and landed on protein-rich chicken. At the forefront of the search was McDonald's, which scored enormously with McNuggets. Available nationwide in 1983, they quickly became a global phenomenon. Burger rivals quickly hopped onto the nugget bandwagon. Burger King released its own version in 1985, and Wendy's followed with crispy chicken nuggets in 1986. As for White Castle, according to the New York Times, the fast food pioneer sought to attract young customers while also attempting to shake the slider legacy of gutbusters and belly bombers. In 1988, it tested its own version of nuggets, though it mysteriously took another 14 years before chicken rings hit the market. Despite the presence of 100% white meat, chicken rings' high levels of fat, sodium, and carbs make them decidedly unsuitable from a nutritional standpoint. Even though chicken rings and chicken nuggets share a common ancestry and product DNA, White Castle has played up the rivalry between its signature rings and its competitors' nuggets. Recently, the Slider King added fuel to the feud by releasing the results of a nationwide survey of White Castle email subscribers conducted in June 2020. According to the survey's findings, 87% of the respondents preferred White Castle chicken rings over their, quote, amorphous chicken counterpart. They claim they were tastier, more craveable, and even more shareable than nuggets. While White Castle's loyal Craver Nation may be devoutly Team Chicken Ring, the general populace is less enthusiastic. On Ranker, chicken rings recently ranked 25th out of 28 edible White Castle items, even though the chicken ring slider came in 7th. Food sites also tend to toss White Castle's rings to the lower depths of its fast food nugget rankings. While citing their plumpness and dippability, Eater ranked them 6 out of 9 candidates. Even less impressed, websites Mashed and Fast Food were united in ranking the rings last. Perhaps in response to the so-called blandness, White Castle has made numerous attempts to pump up the chicken ring flavor. Over the years, the fast food chain has rolled out limited-time variants, including Buffalo, Hidden Valley Ranch, and Tabasco. Not to be confused with dipping sauces, the flavoring in these chicken rings allegedly comes from flavor powder, which is poured into a bag of freshly fried rings and shaken up. In an effort to mix up not just the traditional chicken ring flavor, but its texture as well, in 2016, White Castle decided to get in on what brand eating dubbed the pretzel trend. Another limited-time experiment, White Castle's pretzel chicken rings were actually breaded with crunchy little chunks of pretzel, minus a sprinkling of rock salt. Eater referred to them as a hybrid of 3 completely unrelated foods, which tasted neither like chicken nor pretzels, and were meaninglessly donut-shaped. Although the pretzel crunchiness earned praise, Eater's reviewer decried the lack of a pretzel essential maltiness and saltiness, which made the limited-time only treat, quote, uniquely awful. It might seem like a culinary contradiction to think that scarfing down a White Castle chicken ring slider can be both good and bad for you. However, in a nutritional breakdown commissioned by Eat This, Not That, registered dietitian Stacey Galbin managed to make a convincing case. First, the good news. Galbin deemed the chicken ring slider with cheese one of the best of White Castle's meal options. Despite the not-so-reassuring presence of 2 breaded chicken rings, Galbin countered that the moderate levels of calories, fat, and sodium in the sandwich make it a decent choice. Things get worse fast when it comes to the crispy chicken ring slider with cheese, however. Who would have thought that the word crispy could do so much damage? Apparently, it does so by radically upping the levels of sodium from 470 milligrams to 620 milligrams. Moral of the menu, if you're in a nutritious state of mind, avoid the crispy. Like all fast food joints worth their salt, White Castle has a secret menu. One fan favorite hack is called the Cowboy Slider, which involves ordering a chicken ring slider, a side of onion rings, and barbecue sauce. First, remove the top bun, then become master of the rings by piling crispy onion rings on top of the crispy chicken rings. From there, turn up the heat by dousing all those rings with sauce before placing the bun back on top and taking a big Texas-sized bite out of that cowboy. Another favorite hack is breakfast-themed, courtesy of White Castle's all-day breakfast policy. It pairs an order of chicken rings with mini Belgian waffles, which come with an essential side of syrup. Make a sandwich by arranging the rings between the two waffles. Pour on the syrup, then let your day begin, regardless of the hour. Incidentally, when Thrillist originally thought up this hack in 2015, it was created with the now discontinued French toast sticks in mind. Faced with a constant tide of criticism questioning the mere existence of a ring-shaped chicken nugget, White Castle has relentlessly defended its trademark poultry treat by defiantly playing up its similarities to actual bling. In 2019, White Castle went so far as to team up with Dr. Pepper to create the Ring Thing giveaway. Customers who ordered chicken rings and a soft drink were automatically entered into a sweepstakes, with prizes that included 400 coupons for sliders and 100 pairs of chicken ring earrings. The grandest prize of all, however, was a Halo-style diamond ring worth $5,000, whose key design feature was a dead ringer for White Castle's crispy chicken treat. The engagement vibe wasn't lost on the fast food company, whose executives take pride in the fact that its chicken rings have played a central role in many marriage proposals within White Castle restaurants. Jamie Richardson, vice president of the family-owned company, confessed to Restaurant Business, "It's not uncommon to have great memories made, whether it's wedding proposals or actual weddings. They can always use chicken rings." Jamie Richardson has been with White Castle since 1999, and according to The Ringer, he's a sucker for love in a fast food setting. As detailed in The Atlantic, White Castle is actually the scene for a lot of, quote, royal weddings, many of which take place on Valentine's Day. This isn't just because many couples love sliders and chicken rings, or because White Castle offers a pretty cheap venue. It's also due to the fact that the chain actively seeks out engaged couples, going so far as to enlist local radio stations to track down candidates. No White Castle wedding seems complete without the symbolic edible rings. They were prominent at Mariana and Jasmine's 2015 Bronx wedding, as well as a 2012 Indianapolis wedding, where guests could choose between ranch chicken rings and jalapeno cheese sliders. Then there was Adam, who grew up in Queens, where he developed a, quote, deeply ingrained love for White Castle. Before tying the knot with Whitney, the other love of his life, Adam took his fiancée to White Castle for the first time, where, as he told brides, she immediately fell for the chicken rings. Happily, she still had enough love left over to tie the knot with Adam at a White Castle destination wedding in Las Vegas. One of the more original fast food promotions in recent years took place in 2018 when White Castle staged what Ad Age described as, quote, an impressively authentic home shopping event on Facebook Live. Riffing on QVC-style jewelry pitches, the White Castle stunt featured Heather and Janelle, played by two improv actresses with seriously flippable hair. While trading lots of eye rolls and juicy ring puns, they spent some 45 minutes hilariously hyping and hawking White Castle chicken rings, complete with a quartet of dipping sauces.
Let's get saucy, Heather!
Along the way, there were supporting cameos from Sarah the chicken ring model, Doug the ring appraiser, and Dylan, the ideal boyfriend who excitedly confessed he was about to propose marriage to his girlfriend at White Castle with, what else, a chicken ring. Heather and Janelle also responded in real time to comments from an audience of over 50,000 viewers who tuned in to watch the live stream. On YouTube, a condensed 30-second version of the mock advertisement was posted and received over 2.3 million views. Who would have guessed that a ring-shaped deep-fried chicken nugget made by an Ohio-based burger joint would become the muse of one of New York City's most avant-garde fashion authorities? Considered one of America's most important young designers, Telfar Clemens grew up eating at White Castle in his native Queens. The experience nourished him to the extent that he not only redesigned some 12,000 new and genderless uniforms for employees at 400 locations, but he also features White Castle-inspired garb in his own collections. There was also the time he single-handedly revived New York Fashion Week's after-party scene by holding a party at a White Castle in Times Square. Vice's ID described it as an astounding, exceptional, and endlessly inspiring party. DJ Michael Magnan had tunes booming behind the counter, while staff circulated with sliders and chicken rings. In 2019, the beloved rings turned up once again at the actual show. In fact, as ID observed, the synergy between Telfar and White Castle is best expressed by the restaurant's most, quote, awkward menu item. Other conventional chicken nuggets try to disguise their so-called further processed origins. The unapologetic chicken ring, on the other hand, makes no such pretense, becoming the perfect symbol for Telfar's no-nonsense, yet celebratory vision of everyday America. It turns out that, contrary to common perception, White Castle is not only fashion-forward, but in the tech vanguard. In 2020, the fast food chain marked its 99th year in business by announcing a partnership with Miso Robotics, creator of Flippy the Robot. At White Castle, Flippy will be operating several frying stations. If everything goes according to plan, it will soon be responsible for the timely hotness and crispiness of your chicken rings. Although White Castle's negotiations with Miso began in 2019, COVID-19 has made robots even more attractive as restaurants are restructuring to minimize contact. Moreover, robots can tackle kitchen tasks, such as deep frying, that can be both dangerous and tiring, not to mention boringly repetitive. In a July 2020 interview with The Spoon, White Castle Vice President Jamie Richardson announced that Flippy would be starting work soon at an undisclosed Chicago location. Commenting on the robot's importance during pandemic times, Richardson said, "A new hire like Flippy frees us up to have team members do other things like delivery. It remains to be seen if the new robot fried chicken rings will taste differently than the human fried version."
Only ordering cheese sliders at White Castle? Then you're missing out on portable desserts worthy of your local fare. A package deal to feed your whole building and a taste of the past that may not be around forever. Opening in 1921, owner and creator Bill Ingram decided to start White Castle as a family-owned restaurant, selling 5-cent burgers to the hungry masses. Now, 100 years after the first store opened its doors, the company decided to honor their beloved restaurant's birthday with the best gift possible: a birthday cake on a stick. The birthday cake on a stick is one of the latest desserts to join the White Castle family, alongside their cheesecake, brownie, and butter cake, all placed on a stick for maximum portability and satisfaction. It features everything you would expect to see from a regular birthday cake, just smaller and sans birthday candles. This item is made out of vanilla cake filled with confetti-colored sprinkles topped with white frosting and White Castle-themed sprinkles in shades of orange, blue, and white. It's the perfect celebratory sweet tooth fix for non-chocolate lovers, so why not indulge? After all, no one is stopping you from buying a whole 8-sliced cake on a stick for your next birthday celebration. French fries automatically make a meal better, but loaded fries give off entree energy. White Castle's loaded fries were originally a secret menu item, but in 2011, they were added to the roster by popular demand, along with the bacon and cheddar slider. The beauty of White Castle's loaded fries lies in their simplicity, with thick-cut bacon crumbles, melted nacho cheese, and ranch atop a bed of crinkle-cut fries. On the flip side, you can customize this item to satisfy whatever strange flavor combinations your heart desires. A popular option, the White Castle Mutant Loaded Fries from their secret menu, combines melted nacho cheese and bacon crumbles with barbecue sauce and onion chips for an all-out flavor and texture explosion. Few things make chicken parm better than being enclosed between 2 slices of bread. But sometimes such a move is questionable, with soggy buns and chicken oversaturated in marinara sauce killing the experience. However, White Castle's chicken parm sandwich was unmatched with its petite size and perfectly rationed bites. In 2014, the burger chain released Italian pizza sliders featuring a small sandwich resembling a pepperoni pizza and a crispy or grilled chicken slider with marinara, mozzarella, and a side of cheese sticks. Sadly, the legendary sandwich is no longer on White Castle's menu, but its legacy and deliciousness live on in the world of the secret menu. It's up to us to create our own slightly better chicken parm, starting with a chicken slider, upon which you can add bacon and/or cheese if you'd like. Then get an order of mozzarella sticks with marinara sauce and slide those onto the sandwich for that perfect crunchy yet melty bite every time. In the next fast food war, instead of battling for the title of best chicken sandwich, let's make the best fast food fish sandwich trendy. Oftentimes, fish sandwiches are underrated in terms of flavor, from the rich amount of tartar sauce and the crispiness of the fish to the soft flakiness inside. However, when a fish sandwich is bad, it's enough to have you swear off Fish Fridays entirely. Even though White Castle's fish sandwich is small in size, it's mighty in flavor. Most people don't realize that White Castle has a fish sandwich, let alone one of the best. For a burger joint, it ranks high among the pack of seafood fast food favorites, like Long John Silver's and Captain D's, even outpacing giants like Burger King and Arby's. Their Alaskan pollock fish patty crusted in panko is the ideal marriage of flaky and crunchy, with a slice of American cheese adding the perfect amount of saltiness and creaminess. Just don't skimp out on the sauce, preferably tartar. White Castle's breakfast is nothing to throw shade at. In fact, their all-day breakfast with delicious handheld options should be celebrated. Some items are adorably sized in slider fashion, like their breakfast slider with egg and sausage or bacon, and their original beef slider with egg and cheese. But their crown jewel breakfast offering isn't either of these, it's their Belgian waffle slider. In 2017, White Castle introduced a line of Belgian waffle breakfast sandwiches in partnership with a producer in Brussels, Belgium, to give that authentic waffle taste. Their chicken and waffle slider is the southern mashup we all needed. A crispy chicken breast smothered in country gravy and bacon nestled between two waffles. Their classic take on a breakfast sandwich, the Belgian waffle slider, is the more traditional yet delicious option, with egg, bacon, or sausage and your choice of cheese. These give the McGriddle a run for its money. In the time of Impossible Burgers and lab-generated meat, a good fast food veggie burger is far and few between. It's tough for hardcore vegetarians and vegans to find options on the go that don't involve bland steamed vegetables or French fries. White Castle stands out from the pack by having two vegan options, the Impossible Slider and a veggie-based slider. Don't be fooled by the color. The veggie patty, sourced by Dr. Prager's, is made from all the vegetables of the rainbow, like carrots, onions, beans, zucchini, corn, spinach, peppers, broccoli, and herbs. The veggie slider is 100% vegan. Everything is prepared on a separate grill to eliminate cross-contamination and made with vegan buns. You will even find dairy-free cheese options if you order from a New York or New Jersey castle. Their only vegan sauce option is the sweet Thai, but if it doesn't ruffle your feathers that much, jalapeno cheese is the way to go. With other fast food frozen desserts to compete against, like the McFlurry, Wendy's Frosty, and Sonic's Slushies, it's hard to imagine a little burger joint like White Castle offering a superior milkshake. Is it the best milkshake you will ever have? No, but it will taste best when paired with a bunch of sliders and a side of fries.
He burnt my fries!
He burnt my shake!
According to the Whiting-Robertsdale Historical Society, White Castle's milkshakes were first introduced in the early 1950s to compete with other fast food chains like Burger King and McDonald's. They keep things classic with only 3 flavors: strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate. If you are craving more options, order a black and white shake by combining vanilla and chocolate, or add a strawberry to the mix to make a Neapolitan from White Castle's secret menu. It's debatable whether or not a stick makes a dessert taste better, but at least it avoids unnecessary utensils. Their strawberry cheesecake on a stick is delicious regardless, with a delicate strawberry swirl nestled on top of a brownie crust. It accompanies other cheesy delicacies like their fudge-dipped cheesecake on a stick, not to mention a grocery store version of the sweet treat dipped in chocolate with a graham cracker crust. They introduced one of their newest desserts in time for their Valentine's Day dinner special. Their love-fueled dinner, filled with fancy tablecloths and tableside service, has been a Valentine's Day tradition at White Castle since 1991, complete with 10 sliders of your choice, 2 21-ounce sodas, and a side of French fries. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, their signature dinner was turned into a to-go carry-out box, perfect for a romantic fast food dinner in the car. One of the biggest surprises we found was that White Castle has more than just American cheese. They offer a wide array of cheese toppings like smoked cheddar, vegan cheddar, and even nacho cheese sauce. However, their jalapeno cheese is a spicy yet savory addition to amp up any sandwich.
Say cheese!
Cheese!
Apparently, everyone else on Reddit understood the assignment and has been partaking in the spicy cheese selection to break up the monotony of regular cheese sliders. You can add it to virtually any sandwich, such as the fish slider, veggie slider, or even the Belgian waffle slider for an extra kick to your morning breakfast. There are even grocery store frozen jalapeno cheese sliders for those who don't live close enough to a White Castle. The history of onion rings goes way back. They increased in popularity in the early 1900s thanks to an advertisement for Crisco published in the New York Times. Today, nearly every drive-thru has onion rings on its menu. White Castle wasn't the first to sell onion rings, but they are one of the only fast food joints that offers onion chips. A cross between an onion ring, a French fry, and a potato chip, the onion chip is perhaps the superior option when comparing it side by side to the onion ring. It's perfect for mindless eating like a French fry, but you also don't have to deal with the onion filling coming out after the first bite. Plus, it's short in stature, so it's easy to layer on a burger for more onion flavor or loaded French fries. And unlike their competitors, White Castle uses real onions for their onion rings and chips. In 1927, White Castle revolutionized the fast food industry by creating the concept of a carryout bag. making fast food even faster. Their method of selling sliders by the sack has been a constantly evolving phenomenon, with their signature and easily recognizable carryout bags. Their Crave packages have been an easy and sturdy way to transport mass quantities of sliders and fries, from their Crave case that carries 30 sliders to their Crave crate that holds 100 different sliders. In 2020, White Castle unveiled the stylish and retro-themed Crave clutch to make carryout more aesthetically pleasing. The box resembles a vintage boombox you would see strolled down the street in the 1980s, with a leather stitch detailing in the handle for superior portability. Its red and blue colors are eye-catching, and the "Long Live Sliders" tagline makes the box instantly recognizable to anyone who knows the White Castle Crave. It can hold 20 sliders and is worth picking up for the collectible box alone.
If there's one thing I've learned, it's that if you're craving White Castle, the burgers here just don't cut it.
There's nothing like revisiting the past to make you feel grateful for the present. In honor of White Castle's centennial anniversary, they introduced the 1921 slider. The original slider was created when the founder, Billy Ingram, pressed a meatball into a flat patty that would be flippable and instantly famous. Since then, White Castle has produced many firsts in the industry, and there's no better way to celebrate that than by creating a new, fully loaded slider.
Picture it. Sicily, 1921.
The biggest recognizable difference with the 1921 slider is its lack of squared edges and its extra toppings. It comes with a 100% beef patty topped with grilled onions, cheddar cheese, tomatoes, lettuce, and pickles. While they may be bringing the menu full circle to its humble beginnings, in a way, they are making a classic feel new and inventive again.